Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about session 6 of the raw material. And I just want to let everyone know I've gotten a little bit of feedback that my audio isn't great all of the time. So I'm switching it up and trying a different microphone. So anyone who's listened to multiple sessions of this podcast, if you have any feedback about whether this mic is better or worse, I would be glad to hear that. I will continue to try to do my best to put out something that's at least listenable. I unfortunately do not have any sort of studio or sound absorbing equipment. I think that's probably the main problem. I'm just recording this in my bedroom, so I will keep trying out different things to see what works best. In the meantime, I appreciate everyone for sticking with me, even if the audio isn't perfect. So let's go ahead and jump into session 6. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner. We would like to continue the material from yesterday. We had to cease before... Whatever Dawn says after this is inaudible, but we can just presume that Dawn said something like, before the instrument ran out of energy. So Ra says, I am Ra. This is well with us. So where we're picking up is the third area of teach learning, which is the spirit complex. Session 5, we talked about how to balance the mind, how to balance the body. Now Ra's going to talk about the spirit. Ra says, we proceed now with the third area of teach learning concerning the development of the energy powers of healing. The third area is the spiritual complex, which embodies the fields of force and consciousness, which are the least distorted of your mind-body-spirit complex. The exploration and balancing of the spirit complex is indeed the longest and most subtle part of your learned teaching. We have considered the mind as a tree. The mind controls the body. With the mind single-pointed, balanced, and aware, the body, comfortable in whatever biases and distortions make it appropriately balanced for that instrument, the instrument is then ready to proceed with the great work. That is the work of wind and fire. The spiritual body energy field is a pathway, or channel. When body and mind are receptive and open, then the spirit can become a functioning shuttle or communicator from the entity's individual energy of will upwards, and from the streamings of the creative fire and wind downwards. The healing ability, like all other, what this instrument would call paranormal abilities, is affected by the opening of a pathway or shuttle into intelligent infinity. There are many upon your plane who have a random hole or gateway in their spirit energy field, sometimes created by the ingestion of chemicals such as what this instrument would call LSD, who are able, randomly and without control, to tap into energy sources. They may or may not be entities who wish to serve. The purpose of carefully and consciously opening this channel is to serve in a more dependable way, in a more commonplace or usual way, as seen by the distortion complex of the healer. To others, there may appear to be miracles. To the one who has carefully opened the door to intelligent infinity, this is ordinary. This is commonplace. This is as it should be. The life experience becomes somewhat transformed, and the great work goes on. At this time, we feel these exercises suffice for your beginning. We will, at a future time, when you feel you have accomplished that which is set before you, begin to guide you into a more precise understanding of the functions and uses of this gateway and the experience of healing. So this here's a pretty big response from Ra. In fact, I feel like this might be one of the most commonly quoted things that I quote as a response to people who are asking questions and trying to figure things out about the raw material, because it is a very concise way of describing how the spirit works and how to properly utilize the spirit. So once the mind and the body are balanced and receptive and open, then the spirit can begin its work. And Ra associates the healing ability with all other quote-unquote paranormal abilities, like telepathy or astral projection, the things that we associate with metaphysical abilities. And some people gain access to those skills temporarily or even permanently by using a lot of psychedelic drugs, right? Using these intense psychoactive drugs creates a configuration in the mind that gives us access to these abilities, again, at least in a temporary way. However, Ross says that that's not the best way to gain access to these abilities, because you can actually damage your energy field, your aura. You can create holes in your aura that allow random entities to tap into you and use you as an instrument without your will agreeing to that. And Ross says they may or may not be entities who wish to serve, but truly entities who wish to serve aren't going to use random holes in your energy field to manipulate you or use you. It's really most of the time in that situation going to be negative entities who find that quote-unquote window, and then maybe now that you've developed some more intense visualization capabilities, maybe these random entities are going to plant frightful, scary visualizations into your mind complex to try to unsettle you, to scare you. And I mean, maybe there are random positive beings who see you as open and receptive and requesting positive help, and they might also then use those holes to give you positive visions, but you don't have as much control over these holes that are created in your energy field by intense drugs like LSD. I think we all know people who have, even, like, it can happen even just the first time you use LSD. You can really damage your aura, your energy field, your psyche in an almost irreparable way. Lots of people lose a portion of themselves to these drugs. And, you know, this isn't a blanket statement that all usage of LSD is bad necessarily. I know a lot of people have had very positive experiences using psychedelic drugs. I've used mushrooms a handful of times, and I've only had positive experiences from it. And so people can take it really personally, this portion of the material, they can take it very personally. But really what Ra is saying here is that there is a slow and careful way to gain access to the same abilities that LSD gives you access to, that are safe, that don't ultimately cause you harm. It just isn't as dramatic of a shift. The LSD moves you along the pathway very quickly, and that's what causes damage. But if you take the path slowly, by meditating every day, by trying to serve others, by balancing your chakras and your mind and your body, then you gain access to these abilities, and it isn't as impressive to the self. Because I think that's what happens is when we take LSD, we're like, oh my God, our mind gets blown, right? Literally and figuratively. But if you're carefully opening the pathway to intelligent infinity, you're very rarely going to have that mind-blown feeling. Everything is just going to shift so gradually that you won't notice that shift. Maybe when you look back with perspective, when you gain many years of experience and you look back to who you were, how you used to react to things, how your life used to be, then you can see that change over a long period of time. And the things that you may have gained that don't seem so strange or out of place to you still might seem strange and out of place for somebody else who hasn't done that work, who hasn't slowly moved their ability to access intelligent infinity. They might still see you doing miracles, what they think of as miracles. But for the healer who has properly opened that gateway, it's not going to feel as dramatic. It's not going to seem like such a miracle. It's just going to seem like, this is my life. This is what I do. This is how I am. This is how energy flows through me. And so I think this is a really important point that Ra makes. And it goes into the archetypal mind, essentially, which I'll only briefly discuss here because we're way ahead of that. But Ra says when we use the mind complex, we have two choices. We can take the slow and steady way that they equate with courting a maiden, very patient, doing quote-unquote the right thing, whereas there's also then plundering the prostitute, where you're trying to gain as much as you can from the deep mind as quickly as possible. And essentially using psychedelic drugs is along the lines of plundering the prostitute. You're trying to get as much as you can in such a short period of time. And it can be profound, it can be transformative, it can be ultimately helpful in your overall being, but it should never ever become something that you see as a necessary tool, that you become dependent upon, that you justify as more important than doing the slow and steady path. Maybe as a accessory to the slow and steady path. Occasional use of psychedelic drugs can be helpful, but in general, you're still just taking a risk when you do those drugs. You can create, Ross says it's random hole or gateway in your spirit energy field. And so it's just best to be very careful with those things. And what's also important to consider, we'll get into this more as these sessions go on. The reason Rob brings up LSD is because Carla had taken LSD. Carla took 2 doses of LSD during these first few Ra sessions. And Ra later says that this was planned by negative entities because they wanted to exacerbate the potential negative effects of taking this drug. So again, the closer you are to the light, the more likely you have outside influences trying to meddle and create the worst possible scenario in things where the potential downfall, the potential drawbacks are extensive. So ultimately, it's best, I think, Ra is saying, to avoid these types of drugs as much as possible, especially if you're on a spiritual path, on a serious spiritual path. Because truly, most people take LSD for recreational purposes. They take it to feel good, to have a fantastical, mesmerizing experience, to escape the reality that we're locked into, to escape the need to take the slow and steady path to opening the gateway to intelligent infinity. So ultimately, I think it's just best to avoid those things and meditate every day, have patience, and open the gateway in the more slow and explicit way that Ra continues to encourage and describe throughout these books. So yeah, I've quoted this session as much, if not far more, than basically any other session that I've ever copy and pasted into a response to someone on the internet, because it does talk about the careful usage of finding the careful means of finding the gateway to intelligent infinity, and the drawbacks that come from not being careful about the ways that we find intelligent infinity, because there are lots of people who find the raw material and have used a lot of psychedelic drugs and have psychotic episodes and struggle with reintegrating and grounding into their physical reality after they use these drugs. That's a very common thing that I've seen lots of times. So yeah, Ra advises in their own way, and I would agree that these drugs have more potential for harm than they do for good, and that anything you want from these drugs can be achieved in a much slower, careful, conscious way. So, we're going to go ahead and go to the next question. Dawn asks, I've been asked if it is possible for Tom Flaherty to attend one of these communication sessions tomorrow. Are you familiar with the entity Tom Flaherty? I am Ra. The mind-body-spirit complex sound vibration of Tom Flaherty is acceptable. We caution you to carefully instruct this entity in the frame of mind and the various appurtenances which it must understand before it is conducted into the circle. And then Dawn asks, I'm not quite sure what you mean by appurtenances. And Ra says, I was referring to the symbolic objects which trigger this instrument's distortions towards love light. The placement and loving acceptance of them by all present is important in the nurturing of this instrument. Therefore, the appurtenances involved must be described and their presence explained in your own words of teach learning, for you have the proper attitude for the required results. So, their friend Tom was going to visit. Dawn asks if he's of the proper vibration, and Ross says yes, as long as you describe Carla's altar, essentially, and the purpose of the altar, and how it protects her, and how, it's for her. And then the next question, Dawn says, he'll understand me. We'll be very careful to totally inform Tom before he attends. Thank you very much, which, is what Ross says, that Tom will understand if Dawn explains it to him, because Dawn is able to. Dawn's a great teacher. Dawn can put it into context for Tom, and Tom would understand, accept, and integrate with these symbolic objects. So then Dawn goes on to ask, it seems to me that it might be an appropriate time to include a little more historical background of yourself, possibly information having to do with where you came from prior to involvement with planet Earth, if this is possible. I am Ra. I am, with the social memory complex of which I am a part, one of those who voyaged outward from another planet within your own solar system, as this entity would call it. The planetary influence was that you call Venus. We are a race old in your measures. When we were at the sixth dimension, our physical beings were what you would call golden. We were tall and somewhat delicate. Our physical body complex covering, which you call the integument, had a golden luster. In this form, we decided to come among your peoples. Your peoples at that time were much unlike us in physical appearance, as you might call it. We, thus, did not mix well with the population and were obviously other than they. Thus, our visit was relatively short, for we found ourselves in the hypocritical position of being acclaimed as other than your other selves. This was the time during which we built the structures in which you show interest. So here's Ra saying they came from Venus. They're a race old in your measures. Later on, they go to say that it was about 2.5 billion, over 2 billion years ago that they harvested out of third density on Venus. So quite a long time ago. And obviously, now they're in the sixth density, quite far along. They came in their sixth density form to Earth, which was tall, slender, and golden. And though they thought that the Egyptians at that time would be able to accept them without a lot of distortion, they were not able to do that. I mean, that's quite a big ask, I think, to expect humans, to any human of any advanced civilization, to see these tall, slender, golden beings from Venus, once from Venus, no longer from Venus, but now way evolved beyond Earthlings, obviously, over 2 billion years beyond in evolution. That was difficult to do. So that is when they built the pyramids. They walked on Earth that one time. They've still been involved in Earth before and after that, but that was the one time that they actually landed, came as physical beings. It didn't go well. So Dawn asks, how did you journey from Venus to this planet? And Ra says, we used thought. And so, again, Dawn's special interest as far as UFOlogy goes was craft, was the actual UFO, the actual flight craft that transports beings from one place to another, that goes, close to the speed of light, beyond the speed of light, however it is that these hyper advanced entities travel through the universe. Figuring this out was very important to Dawn. So we're going to see Dawn struggle with that a little bit here, in understanding that it isn't even the vehicle. The vehicle is a very small portion of the travel. It's just really the traveling actually happens in the mind. What we perceive as physical reality is not what beings beyond this density perceive as physical reality. So their ability to move through space is not limited to having a vehicle that can move them through large portions of space. Ra was able to just think about being here, and they came here, and it was very simple for them. And so 6.6, Dawn asks, then would it be possible to take one of the people at that time from our planet and place him on Venus? Would he survive? Were the conditions much? The rest of the question then is inaudible. Ra says, the third density conditions are not hospitable to the life forms of your peoples. The fifth and sixth dimensions of that planetary sphere are quite conducive to growing, learning, teaching. And just as to clarify here, the words dimension and density have some difference, but Ra essentially uses them interchangeably. They're talking about the planet Venus is in the 5th and 6th dimension right now, probably the 6th, but they later go on to say that it's really a great place for 5th density entities to do their work currently, as it is right now. We know as humans that landing on Venus isn't really possible for us. We've sent, one craft there that was able to send us a few pictures, and it just melted within a few minutes of having landed and entering the atmosphere. So Venus is just not proper for our physical vehicles to be there. But Dawn is again trying to conceptualize this movement of being from planet to planet and wondering if, could you then put a human on your spacecraft and take them back to Venus? And I was like, we wouldn't do that because it wouldn't work. A human wouldn't survive on Venus. So 6.7 is Dawn asking, how were you able to make the transition from Venus? And I assume the 6th dimension, would that be invisible when you reached here? Did you have to change your dimensions to walk on the Earth? And Ross says, you will remember the exercise of the wind. The dissolution into nothingness is the dissolution into unity, for there is no nothingness. From the 6th dimension, we are capable of manipulating, by thought, the intelligent infinity in each particle of light or distorted light, so that we were able to clothe ourselves in a replica visible in the 3rd density of our mind-body-spirit complexes in the 6th density. We were allowed this experiment by the council which guards this planet. Here what they're saying is that traveling here in 3rd density, our current conceptualization of physics is that objects cannot move faster than the speed of light. And my understanding of that is because objects are made of light. So objects cannot travel faster than light because an object cannot arrive at a place before the building blocks of that physical object arrive at that place. And also, the closer we get to traveling the speed of light, the greater our mass becomes. So once we do travel at the speed of light, how we travel at the speed of light is by just dissolving into the unity of all and becoming that light, and then just moving in that light, becoming the light, moving as a light beam, and then reforming ourselves in a physical configuration. And so here also Ra mentions the exercise of the wind. This is an artifact from session 5 that it has been removed. When Ra gave the balancing exercises for the mind, body, and spirit, they offered Dawn a more specific and explicit version of the balancing exercises that isn't as coded to protect free will from those reading these exercises. And Ra very explicitly said that they should never be published. So there is a small portion of the Ra material that is unpublished because Ra requested that it remained unpublished. However, it really is just a different way of explaining the balancing exercises that are published. It's not a huge thing that has been omitted. It's just the way that they have protected the free will of the majority of people who are going to be reading these books, so that you would have to actually do a bit of the work before these things are more revealed to you. But Ra later does talk about the exercise of fire as well. These are things that are in the private material that Ra specifically said, please, this should never be published, and we will give it to you as long as you promise to never publish it. So, exercise of the wind, the dissolution into nothingness is the dissolution into unity, for there is no nothingness. I think that's an awesome thing to meditate upon, to consider, because we are reaching for unity. We're trying to find that. And Ra says that this is how they travel. They dissolve into nothingness, which is not really nothingness, it's actually just unity. So they dissolve, they become light, they move where they want to go, they reform themselves from that light, and that's how they travel. Then they also mentioned that they were allowed this experiment by the council which guards this planet. So session 6.8 is Dawn asking, where is this council located? And Ra says, the council is located in the octave, or 8th dimension of the planet Saturn, taking its place in an area which you understand in 3rd dimensional terms as the rings. Question 6.9, Dawn asks, Are there any people such as you find on Earth on any of the other planets on this solar system? And Ra asks, do you request space-time present information or space-time continuum information? So basically, Ra's asking, do you mean like right now, if there are other beings, or have there ever been other beings? And in 610, Dawn says both. And Ra says, at one time space, in what is your past, there was a population of third-density beings upon a planet which dwelt within your solar system. There are various names by which this planet has been named. The vibratory sound complex most usually used by your peoples is Maldek. These entities, destroying their planetary sphere, thus were forced to find room for themselves upon this third density, which is the only one in your solar system at their time-space present, which was hospitable and capable of offering the lessons necessary to decrease their mind-body-spirit distortions with respect to the law of one. So we're going to talk more about Maldek, obviously, but at one point, we had another planet in our solar system that had third-density life. They obviously destroyed themselves before they were able to make harvest, so now they have come to this third density and are participating in our planetary sphere. And then Dawn asks, how did they come here? And Ra says, they came through the process of harvest and were incarnated through the processes of incarnation from your higher spheres within this density. So Ra essentially saying they died and then they were born on this planet in a different body. And then Dawn asks, how long ago did this happen in our years? And Ra says, I'm having difficulty communicating with this instrument. We must deepen her state. This occurred approximately 500,000 of your years ago. And Ra will continue to have difficulty with time and years. For some reason, they're not able to calculate years in a precise way, in the same way that we just count revolutions around the sun, which is kind of baffling to me because years are just revolutions around the sun, but Ra can't keep track of how many revolutions around the sun that we've experienced in the time frames that they're talking about. So they're always going to struggle, but I think this estimation of 500,000 years for Maldek to begin their incarnating on our planet is pretty consistent. So question 6.13 is, Dawn says, thanks. Is all of the Earth's population, then, human population of the Earth? Are all of them originally from Maldek? And Ra says, I am Ra. This is a new line of questioning and deserves a place of its own. The ones who were harvested to your sphere, from the sphere known before its dissolution as other names, but to your peoples as Maldek, incarnated, many within your Earth's surface rather than upon it. The population of your planet contains many various groups harvested from other second dimension and cycled third dimension spheres. You are not all one race, or background, or beginning. The experience you share is unique to this time-space continuum. And again, Ra talks about this more in the future. I'm pretty sure they say that there are 17 different planetary races incarnating on Earth right now, and that is a very unique thing. And it's one of the various reasons that Earth is, let's say, special needs at this time during its critical period of harvest, and why I believe we experience such intense tribalism and racism and all of these things that are really difficult third density thought forms that are holding us back from fourth density. On some level, we perceive these differences in a way that causes an instinctual resistance to the other, those that we perceive as the other, that we perceive as not from our own planetary race, whatever race that might be. And I think in general, like a lot of the people who read the raw material specifically are probably wanderers, or in the new wave of early fourth density beings who are incarnating in dual activated bodies. But the third density beings who are still trying to make harvest for the first time, it's very difficult for them because they do perceive these differences on a visceral level. And that's what causes a lot of the tension, the social tension in our third density sphere. So, something I think about a lot. that allows me a lot of compassion for how humans behave with each other. We're all human, but not everybody is from Earth, and not everyone is even from this particular solar system. Lots of beings have come from other solar systems. And so we're going to figure it out. We're going to get there, but it's been a bit of a struggle on our planet, and this isn't typical. This isn't how most third density experiences unravel themselves. Most planets are just one planetary species. So Dawn asks, I think it would be appropriate to discover how the law of one acts in this transfer of beings to our planet and the action of harvest. So again, Dawn's very much interested in how you move one planetary race to another planet. And Ra says, I am Ra. The law of one states simply that all things are one, that all beings are one. There are certain behaviors and thought forms consonant with the understanding and practice of this law. Those who, finishing a cycle of experience, demonstrate various grades of distortion of that understanding of thought and action, will be separated by their own choice into the vibratory distortion most comfortable to their mind-body-spirit complex. This process is guarded or watched by those nurturing beings who, being very close to the law of one in their distortions, nevertheless have the distortion towards active service. Thus, the illusion is created of light, or more properly, but less understandably, light-love. This is in varying degrees of intensity. The spirit complex of each harvested entity moves along the line of light until the light grows too glaring, at which time the entity stops. This entity may have barely reached third density or may be very, very close to the ending of the third density light-love distortion vibratory complex. Nevertheless, those who fall within this octave of intensifying light-love then experience a major cycle during which the opportunities are many for the discovery of the distortions which are inherent in each entity and, therefore, the lessening of these distortions. So here Ra is talking about the process of harvest from second to third density, or what happens to third density entities at the end of a minor or major cycle, the minor cycle being 25,000, the major cycle being 3 times the 25,000 at 75,000. If they fall within the third density vibrational range, then they start another cycle. Whether they're just beginning their third density lessons, whether they've accumulated quite a few and are getting pretty close to fourth density, if they haven't crossed the threshold of fourth density, then they're going to incarnate into third density. That's what happened with Maldek. None of them harvested. I'm pretty sure none of them harvested. They blew up their planet, as Ra will tell us soon. And therefore, they had to incarnate somewhere, and our planet was the closest and most and viable. So they then started another 75,000 year cycle of third density in earthling human mind, body, spirit complexes, and are then continuing to discover and lessen the distortions that are keeping them from fourth density. So here Dawn asks, what is the length in our years of one of these cycles currently? And Ra says, one major cycle is approximately 25,000 of your years. There are 3 cycles of this nature during which those who have progressed may be harvested. At the end of 3 major cycles, that is approximately between 75 and 76,000 of your years, all are harvested regardless of their progress, for during that time the planet itself has moved through the useful part of that dimension and begins to cease being useful for the lower levels of vibration within that density. So after a planet has gone through the 75,000 years of third density experience, the planet itself is harvested. The planet itself becomes a part of the social memory complex of those beings who have also been harvested into fourth density. And then Ra says everyone is harvested because then you either go into the fourth density realm of this planet, or you go to another planet and begin your cycle over on that planet. And so Dawn asks, what is the position of this planet with respect to progression of the cycle at this time? And Ra says, this sphere is at this time in fourth dimension vibration. Its material is quite confused due to the society memory complexes embedded in its consciousness. It has not made an easy transition to the vibrations which beckon. Therefore, it will be fetched with some inconvenience. Again, there's actually a lot going on in this response from Ra. Our planet has moved into the fourth density vibration. We're in that period probably somewhere in the 75 to 76,000 year of third density. We're in that transition period. The planet is still very confused because we have so many heavy third density society memory complexes embedded in our consciousness. So as these fourth density energies are calling to us, we're really struggling to release those third density ideas. And so it will be fetched with some inconvenience. I believe this is in particular talking about the wanderers and the early fourth density entities who are specifically incarnating to serve, to help with the transition. They are the ones who are helping fetch the fourth density vibrational earth and bring it all the way back into its full expression of fourth density. So, 6.17, Dawn asks, is this inconvenience imminent within a few years? And Ra says, I am Ra. This inconvenience, or disharmonious vibratory complex, has begun several of your years in the past. It shall continue unabated for a period of approximately 30 of your years. And then 6.18, Dawn asks, after this 30-year period, I'm assuming will be a fourth dimension or fourth density planet. Is this correct? And Ross says, this is so. So we've passed that 30-year mark. That 30-year mark was around 2012, which was always kind of what our social memory complex had been accepting and preparing for as this transition state into a new version of reality. The shift, though, in general, I think has been subtle. I think there is much, much, much more light and much, much, much more potential to live in aspects of the fourth density planet. But we do still have lots of third density thought forms, and the harvest in this transition is not complete. Ra gives us another time frame later on for when it will be completed, and we've still got work to do, obviously. We're not in fourth density. We're not a planetary social memory complex. We're not all positive beings who are incarnated on Earth. We're in this really interesting time, and that's why things seem so intense and so difficult and often beyond words, because we are beginning our fourth density experience, which fourth density is without words. But we also do not have telepathy, so we have to use words. So this is a very exciting time. We're all here. I'm assuming most people who are studying the Ra material, trying to learn from Ra, are here to help, to do what they can to lift the planetary vibrations, to help fetch its vibrations upwards, and to help heal the planet of its difficult third density vibrational thought forms. So, 619, Dawn says, is it possible to estimate what percentage of the present population will inhabit the fourth density planet? And Ross says, the harvesting is not yet, thus, estimation is meaningless. Then Dawn asks, does the fact that we are in this transition period now have anything to do with the reason that you have made your information available to the population? And Ra says, I am Ra. We have walked among your people. We remember. We remember sorrow. We have seen much. We have searched for an instrument of the proper parameters of distortion in mind-body-spirit complex and supporting an understanding group of mind-body-spirit complexes to accept this information with minimal distortion and maximal desire to serve for some of your years. The answer, in short, is yes. However, we wished you to know that in our memory, we thank you. So, partly, it's coincidence, Ra's saying, that they just happened to be here at this time, at this particular time during this transition period, that they were able to come because of the distortions of this particular group who had incarnated at that particular time. However, they'd been looking for a long time. They'd been searching. If they had to have come 200 years ago, they would have. If they had to come 100 years from now, they would have. But it was that time, 1981, where Dawn's asking these questions, where they were able to come because of this specific group. It wasn't that they were looking during a specific time frame for a specific group. It just so happened that a group did manifest during this time frame. So 6.21, Dawn asked, the disc-shaped craft we call UFOs some have been said to come possibly from the planet Venus. Would any of these be your craft? And Ra says, I am Ra. We have used crystals for many purposes. The craft of which you speak have not been used by us in your space-time present memory complex. However, we have used crystals and the bell shape in the past of your illusion. So what Ra is saying is that, again, they don't use craft. And in the time period where they would have used a craft or had a Venusian craft appear in the skies for people to see wouldn't have happened during the present time period, during the time period where Dawn's been studying UFOs, let's say. But because they have come to Earth at a period of time before, there are thought forms of Venusians coming to Earth, and the concept of a craft bringing them here does exist. And they have used crafts. So this concept does exist as a thought form in our social memory complex, but again, during the time frame where Dawn has been studying UFOs, the bell-shaped craft that had been seen as thought form or whatever were not Ra. That's what they're basically saying right here. And so 6.22, Dawn asks, how many years ago in the past did you use the bell-shaped craft to come here? And Ra says, I am Ra. We visited your peoples 18,000 of your years ago and did not land. Again, 11,000 years ago. So during those times, they did appear in the sky in a bell-shaped craft. And those memories persist within our social memory complex. Dawn asks in 6.23, the photographs of the bell-shaped craft and reports of contact from Venus exist from less than 30 years ago. Do you have any knowledge of those reports? So again, Ra knew that this is what Dawn was asking about. Ra can see what's going on in Dawn's mind, because thoughts are visible to them. And again, Dawn is very much wanting to solve this UFO mystery. And Ra responds, I am Ra. We have knowledge of oneness with these forays of your time-space present. We are no longer a Venus. However, there are thought forms created among your people from our time of walking among you. The memory and thought forms created therefrom are a part of your social memory complex. This mass consciousness, as you may call it, creates the experience once more for those who request such experience. The present Venus population is no longer sixth density. So yeah, they're saying that these visions are essentially thought forms that exist in the memory of our social memory complex, that there are not beings who live on Venus who are traveling to Earth in bell-shaped craft today. That's just not happening. So Dawn asks in 6.24, do any of the UFOs that are presently reported come from other planets here at this time, or do you have this knowledge? And Ra says, I am one of the members of the Confederation of Planets in the service of the Infinite Creator. There are approximately 53 civilizations comprising approximately 500 planetary consciousness complexes in this confederation. This confederation contains those from your own planet who have attained dimensions beyond your third. It contains planetary entities within your solar system, and it contains planetary entities from other galaxies. It is a true confederation in that its members are not alike, but allied in service according to the law of one. And then Dawn asks, do any of them come here at this time in spacecraft, in the past, say, 30 years? And then Ross says, we must state that this information is unimportant. Because you noticed in the last question, Ra didn't answer the question that Dawn asked. That's why Dawn had to more explicitly state his question. Ra goes on to say, if you will understand this, we feel that the information may be acceptably offered. The law of one is what we are here to express. However, we will speak upon this subject. Each planetary entity which wishes to appear within your third-dimensional space-time distortion requests permission to break quarantine, as you may call it, and appear to your peoples. The reason and purpose for this appearance is understood and either accepted or rejected. There have been as many as 15 of the Confederation entities in your skies at any one time, the others available to you through thought. At present, there are 7 which are operating with craft in your density. Their purposes are very simple: to allow those entities of your planet to become aware of infinity which is often best expressed to the uninformed as the mysterious or unknown. So, Dawn's going to ask more questions about UFOs. We're going to get into this a little bit more in detail. But there are entities around our planet in spaceships, quote unquote, but they actually aren't visible to us because beyond the fourth density, entities can choose to be invisible to us. And in response to Dawn's specific question, in the past 30 years, it hasn't been the Confederation who has appeared in our skies in a way that many people can see them. The Confederation appears in thought form. They may send a thought form of their vehicle to a specific being or partially unveil their invisibility to one specific being or to one small group. But we'll talk more about the Confederation and UFOs. Dawn continues to bring it up for several more sessions. So, 6.26, Dawn asks, I am fully aware that you are primarily interested in disseminating the Law of One. However, it is my judgment, could be wrong, that in order to disseminate this material, it will be necessary to include questions such as the one I have just asked for the purpose of creating the widest possible dissemination of the material. If this is not the objective, I could limit my questions only to the application of the Law of One. But I understand that at this time, it is the objective to widely disseminate this material. Is this correct? And Ra says, I am Ra. This perception is only slightly distorted in your understanding/learning. We wish you to proceed as you deem proper. That is your place. We, in giving this information, find our distortion of understanding of our purpose to be that not only of the offering of information, but the weighing of it according to our distorted perceptions of its relative importance. Thus, you will find our statements, at times, to be those which imply that a question is unimportant. This is due to our perception that the given question is unimportant. Nevertheless, unless the question contains the potential for answer giving which may infringe upon free will, we offer our answers. So, Dawn's distortions are believing that UFOs are exciting and will be an entry point into understanding this wider philosophy. And ultimately, again, we talk more about this as it goes on. This isn't precisely true. Ra is wanting to honor Dawn's free will in how he uses this information. They're stepping aside in what their desires and distortions for the promulgation of this information might be, because they want to allow Dawn to make his own choices and to serve the planet in the ways that he thinks is best, which is his honor duty prerogative. That's a citation that will come up soon here too. But again, early on, Ross said that their intention of teaching was not to be historical. It was meant to be philosophical. And these questions about UFOs in the past is along the lines of historical. And they don't think these questions are important. But it's hard to tell Dawn that explicitly. Dawn eventually gets it for the most part, but he does struggle with questioning a lot about UFOs in the following dozen or so more sessions. It keeps coming back up because, again, this is a riddle that Dawn has been working on for a large portion of his life. I think he was 17 when the Thomas Mantell incident happened, where Thomas Mantell, the pilot, saw a strange UFO, tried to follow it, flew too high, ran out of oxygen, his plane crashed, and he died. That was a great big media spectacle, and it was important to Dawn, and it was very formative for Dawn. So here Dawn is in his 50s, so we're talking 30-something years. Dawn has been trying to solve the quote-unquote UFO problem, and it's not really an easy thing for him to let go of and understand what's actually going on, what's happening. But after enough questioning, it does become more and more clear what is going on and why it's going on. So, question 6.27, Dawn says, "Thank you very much. We do not want to overtire the instrument. It is now considerably over the normal working time. Could you tell me the condition of the instrument?" And Ross says, "The instrument is balanced due to your care. However, her physical vehicle is growing stiff." And Dawn says, "In that case, perhaps we should continue at a later time." And Ross says, "We shall agree. Therefore, unless you have a short question, we will take our leave." And the last one is 6.29. Dawn asks, "The only question I have is that I must assume since Leonard was here when you first made contact, it'd be as suitable for him to be here as Tom. Is this correct?" And Ross says, "This is correct and completes the number of those at this time able to come who are suitable. Again, remember the instructions given for the preparation of the vibratory sound complex, Tom. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator, Adonai." So, the last question is just, can Leonard come again? Leonard, who was here during the first session, and Ross says yes, but they're the only two. They're the only two that we think are suitable right now, that would be able to blend with the group harmonics and distortions that we need for you to maintain contact with us. So that is session 6. It's a pretty long session. Dawn even comments that it might be one of the sessions where Carla was on LSD. I can't remember specifically which 2 sessions, or maybe even 3 sessions, if they did 2 sessions in the day where she took the LSD doses. I feel like the information might be somewhere. Maybe I'll go looking for it to see if I can find specifically what sessions it was, but this might have been one of the sessions where Carla took the LSD, because it actually, in some ways, strengthened her ability to do the channeling. But again, the drawbacks of the LSD were ultimately absolutely not worth the benefit of having a couple of longer sessions because of the drug, because she eventually gets sick from taking the LSD. And this makes the sessions have to be a lot shorter because she's actually very ill, and she's ill for several months because of that. So, again, there are benefits to taking LSD, but the drawbacks typically far outweigh the potential benefits. So, thank you for listening again. Again, I'd be happy to hear how this audio experience was for anyone who's listened to more than one session of this podcast. And I will continue to get these out at the rate I'm able to. I don't really have a set schedule, so I can't make any promises as to when session 7 will be out, but I will do my best to find time to record and edit the next episode. So I thank you all for seeking the love and the light with me, and I appreciate all of you who are doing your best to embody the love and the unity of the infinite Creator. I truly, truly am grateful. And I'm also grateful to our infinite Creator for allowing us this creation and these experiences that we get to share together. I'll see you next time.